Howdy folks, welcome back. It is me, the Tank Commander, and get a lot of this. We are less than a week away from our cruise, ladies and gentlemen. Give yourselves a pat on the back because we are 6 days away. Six days. And hey, we're going along with the series with the most useless, pathetic, and obsolete tanks of World War II. And once again, RJ 2000, you are the champion again with the votes, with 2 votes to your name. Now, surprisingly, there seemed to have been a problem when I updated the uploaded the video yesterday. It seemed that the votes for you, RJ 2000, did not show up on the video. I saw you send me the pictures of the messages. Apparently, there was a power outage in my area, but it didn't hurt me. So, yeah, so I'm not sure about that, so hopefully when we get this video out today, it'll work a lot better. But hey, that's enough chit-chat. So, what is it that we're doing today? Well, ladies and gentlemen, I have the winning votes here. And here it is. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the Russian medium tank, the T28. This tank was designed in 1931 and was first produced in 1932. It's a very large tank. You have to understand, this was at the time of the 1930s when the famous land ships were coming out, like its big brother, the T-35, the British A1E1 Independent, and the German Neubaufahrzeug, and the Großtraktor Krupp. Now, this tank, if I remember correctly, weighs about 32 tons, and it is a very, like I said, it's a very long vehicle. And as you look on the front, you see that? Those are mini machine gun turrets there. So, this thing was a 6-man crewed vehicle. It had a driver, 2 machine gun turret gunners, and a commander, main gunner, and loader. Now, this tank is fairly large. I mean, it's a very tall target. And to be honest, when I think about it, this tank really deserves a little bit of more respect for what action it did see. For example, this tank was used in the Battle of Khalkhin Gol in Manchuria in 1939 against the Japanese, where it had to go against the Type 89 Otsu and the Type 95 Hago, and if you remember what I said from that other video, the Type 94 Tankette. Now, so, what's that? Oh, you're wondering about more of the stats. That's no problem. So, start off, we'll have the engine. It was powered by a McCullen M17 V12 diesel engine, totaling 500 horsepower, and that gave it a top speed of 37 kilometers an hour, or 23 miles an hour. And, to be honest, this was, for the time, it was pretty fast. I mean, the Sherman usually went 25 miles an hour. However, I'm pulling up the model from Armour Inspector. As you can see, this tank's armor was really bad. The hull armor was 30 millimeters on the front, 20 millimeters on the side, and 20 millimeters at the rear. The turret armor was 20 millimeters all around. And let's just say this thing was incredibly under-armored for a tank its size. For some odd reason, I saw that one source said that its armor was 80 millimeters thick at one point. I still fail to find any part of the tank that actually says that. Maybe it's effective armor on the front. It might be the angled front plate, maybe. But I still have yet to see that. So anyway, on with the armaments. The main armament of the T28 was a 76.2 millimeter or 3-inch KT-27 76.2 millimeter howitzer. Now, anybody of you who are guessing who play World of Tanks or World of Tanks Blitz, you should know the Tier 3 Premium, the BT-7 Arty. But let's face it, that was a light tank stuck with an artillery gun. This is a medium tank with a gun that had barely any more armor-penetrating power than the Japanese 57mm on the Type 89 Otsu. This tank that you see here, this is different. This is the T28E. What you see the gun here is a 76.2mm L10 gun, which I believe was the final armament that it was produced with. However, those who play World of Tanks, here's the picture here of this vehicle. This is the T28E F30. Now, this was an experimental tank produced in 1941. It never got beyond the prototype stage. And what you see is an 85mm F30 cannon that was fitted to the turret. Switch the view now. In World of Tanks, this is known as the premium Tier 4 Russian medium tank. Now, the tank has changed throughout the years that World of Tanks has been out. I'm not sure if you can even get it in the shop anymore. Anybody who plays World of Tanks, feel free to let me know about that. But anyway, the secondary armament was 4 or 5 DT 7.62mm machine guns. Now you're probably asking, what do you mean by 4 or 5? Well, as you see on the model here, you have the 2 machine gun turrets in the front. You got the coaxial machine gun next to the main gun. You have the traditional 1920s turret with the machine gun in the back, which is also visible in some of the early KV-1 models. And in this case, you see the DT machine gun on the top of the turret as well for the commander to use. Now, in some cases, that would sound pretty scary to face against. But unfortunately, the multi-turreted tanks just were falling out of interest. Now, you have to remember, the Russians also had the big brother, the T-35, and it had even more than that. It had the SMK, which was the competitor to the KV-1. Further on with this, so what happened with this tank? Well, besides seeing use in 1939 against the Japanese, it also saw service against the Finns in 1938 and 1940 with the Winter War there. Unfortunately, as you pull up the screen here, many of those were captured. Now you have to remember, these tanks were not meant to go into combat against other tanks. This was meant to be an infantry support tank. Unfortunately, you gotta remember, a tank this size and such thin armor, you'd be better having a Churchill at that time. Excuse me. So yeah, many of these were captured by the Finns. And then after that, it saw limited use in the invasion of Poland when the Soviets invaded. More actions against Polish armor were with the T-26s, which, frankly, I'd still have to say was pretty bad, but they had a better armor-penetrating gun. And then finally after that, it saw service against the Germans in Operation Barbarossa when they invaded Russia in summer of 1941. But sadly, many of these saw horrible fates. Most of them broke down and had maintenance troubles. This trouble lasted through to the KV-1 as well. But those that did see action were not really effective, because the superior armor-penetrating guns that the Germans had, like for example, the Germans had the 50mm, I believe it was the KWK L53, I believe, which was a 50mm gun, and that thing had much greater armor-penetrating capacity than the 76.2mm. You have to remember, most of these still had the infantry howitzer mounted. And there were some that were used as what were known as war booty tanks, which means that when the Russians began pushing back against, like, Finland and Germany, they encountered those things as war booty tanks. Of course, in German, that's Beutepanzer. if I was to say, now to be honest, in World of Tanks and World of Tanks Blitz, this as a Tier 4 Russian medium tank, I would say it's okay, like when you get the top gun, which is a 57mm ZIS-5. But the thing is, this thing is so large and its armor is so bad, you really have no hope of saving your crew, really. Because when you think about it, tanks like this were basically from such an obsolete time, it's hard to believe that this thing actually would have seen combat. Granted, against the Japanese, because they had no significant medium tanks at the time, except the Otsu, which was also not supposed to be a tank versus tank, it fared pretty well because it also had a crap gun, but then again, its gun was better than the infantry gun that the Japanese had, because the Japanese one had even less armor penetrating capacity. But when actually going against actual armored spearheads, like the Wehrmacht, they just did not show any combat value. And that's why I say this tank was not necessarily pathetic, but it was obsolete. And it was direly obsolete. And so, that wraps up our video today. I'll be seeing you guys tomorrow with the next video, and seeing that after this, there's only 5 days left. There's 6 tanks left. So remember, everybody, make sure you get out there and vote, because we got a lot to do in the next several days before this cruise. And I hope to see you guys then. So, see you on the next vlog, everybody.